The low murmur of the VA waiting room was punctuated by the sharp click of the administrator's pen. Elias Thorne, Eli, to the few who still remembered, felt the familiar tremor start in his right hand, the one scarred by fire and forgotten history. He watched the young woman behind the desk, her name tag Ms. Albright gleaming, as she pushed his file back across the counter. Mr. Thorne, as I've explained, your medical claims continue to be flagged. We have no record of a Project Chimera, nor any classified operations matching your description during the period you cited. Without official documentation, we simply cannot process your request for advanced burn treatment or physical therapy. A man in the next chair, scrolling loudly on his phone, chuckled. Another one of those secret squirrels, huh? Probably just fell off a ladder. Eli's jaw tightened, the comment a dull throb against the phantom pain in his hand. He said nothing, his gaze fixed on the sterile linoleum, the weight of 2 decades of silence pressing down. Elias Thorne was a man forged in the crucible of conflicts the public never saw. At 68, his frame remained surprisingly solid, a testament to years of rigorous training and an iron will. But time, and the invisible wounds of war, had begun to etch their mark. His face, a roadmap of weathered lines, was framed by a shock of wiry gray hair he kept cropped close. His right hand, a landscape of puckered, shiny scar tissue, often curled involuntarily, a painful reminder of the night that had stolen not just his mobility, but his official identity. He'd walked into the Fort Sterling, Virginia clinic that morning, the crisp autumn air doing little to soothe the chronic ache in his shoulder. The clinic, a sprawling, anonymous brick building, always felt like a holding pen. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly pallor on the faded motivational posters and the rows of hard plastic chairs. The air hung thick with the scent of stale coffee, antiseptic, and unspoken anxieties. Eli had arrived precisely at 0800, his appointment for 0830. Punctuality, a habit drilled into him during his 25 years as a Marine gunnery sergeant, was one of the few constants in a life now defined by bureaucratic limbo. He'd spent the last 7 years fighting the VA. Not for a medal, not for recognition, but for the basic medical care his body desperately needed. The burns on his hand and arm, the shrapnel lodged deep in his shoulder, the persistent ringing in his ears, all were direct consequences of Project Chimera, a deniable black operation launched in the chaotic aftermath of the 2003 invasion of a Central Asian nation. Their mission: extract a compromised CIA asset and his family before they were executed by a splinter cell. Eli's 6-man Marine reconnaissance team, operating under the almost mythical Ghost Bat designation, had been the last resort, the unit designed to vanish without a trace if things went sideways. And they had. He remembered the dust, thick and choking, kicked up by the rotor wash of the MH-60 Black Hawk. The screams of the civilians, the rapid-fire crackle of AK-47s, the smell of burning fuel. His team, small and lethal, had secured the target, but a surprise counter-assault had turned the extraction into a brutal close-quarters fight. Eli, the team's demolitions expert, had rigged a hasty charge to collapse a tunnel, creating a choke point for the pursuing hostiles. The explosion had worked, but a secondary blast, from an unexpected cache of enemy munitions, had sent a wall of fire through the narrow passage, engulfing him. He'd made it out, barely, pulled by his team leader, Captain Ramirez, his right arm a screaming inferno. Ramirez had died moments later, taking a burst of automatic fire to the chest as he covered their retreat. Eli had cradled Ramirez's head in the sand, the captain's last words a rasping whisper. "Tell Maria. Tell her I loved her, Eli. Tell her." It was for something. He'd promised, a promise he'd carried, unspoken, for 2 decades. Back in the present, Ms. Albright's voice cut through his reverie. "Mr. Thorne, are you listening? I understand this is frustrating, but my hands are tied. Your service records show a standard discharge in 2005. No combat injuries listed, no special operations. We need a DD-214 that reflects your claims, or a letter from a commanding officer with appropriate clearance." Eli slowly reached into his faded canvas messenger bag. He pulled out a worn, silver Zippo lighter, its surface tarnished with age and use. He flipped open the lid, the familiar clink echoing in the sterile room. On its side, barely visible beneath decades of wear, was a crudely etched bat symbol, wings outstretched, and below it, the date, March 14th, 03. He'd carried that Zippo since his first tour, a gift from Ramirez. The bat symbol was their unofficial ghost bat insignia, etched by Ramirez himself with a stolen dental tool. "This is my documentation, ma'am," Eli said, his voice a low rasp, and used to speaking so much. He held up the Zippo. "This, and the scars." Ms. Albright peered at the lighter, then at his hand, a flicker of something that might have been pity, or perhaps just annoyance, crossing her face. "Mr. Thorne, I appreciate your sentimentality, but we require official military documentation, not a souvenir." The man with the phone snickered again. "Souvenirs don't get you a free ride, old-timer." Eli felt a familiar wave of cold anger, but years of discipline held it in check. He simply closed the Zippo with another soft click and returned it to his bag. "I understand," he said, the words heavy with resignation. He pushed himself up, his right leg stiff, a dull ache radiating from his hip. Another souvenir from that night. "I'll just reschedule." As he turned, the door to the waiting room opened. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the morning light. He was a man in his late 60s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his silver hair neatly combed, his bearing one of quiet authority. Retired General William Bill Sterling, former head of Special Operations Command, was a legend in certain circles. He visited the Fort Sterling, Virginia clinic quarterly, not for his own care, but as a volunteer advocate for veterans. General Sterling's gaze swept across the room, a practiced, assessing glance. His eyes paused on Eli, then, almost imperceptibly, dropped to Eli's right hand as it rested on his messenger bag. Eli hadn't fully tucked the Zippo away. A corner of it, with the faint bat etching, was visible. The general stopped dead. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of intense recognition in their depths. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, then another until he was standing directly in front of Eli. The man on the phone, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, lowered his device. Ms. Albright looked up, startled by the general's unexpected halt. "Gunny Thorne." General Sterling's voice was a low rumble, but it cut through the room's ambient noise like a blade. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with the weight of shared history. Eli froze. The name, the rank, the certainty in the general's tone. It was a shock to his system. No one had called him Gunny Thorne in decades, not outside of his own silent memories. He met the general's gaze, a lifetime of classified operations warring with the instinct to deny. General Sterling's eyes dropped again to the Zippo, then to Eli's scarred hand. Project Chimera. March 14, 2003. Ghost Bat 6. The words hung in the air, a sudden, impossible truth. The waiting room went silent. Ms. Albright's eyes widened, and the man with the phone looked genuinely confused. Eli felt the tremor in his hand intensify, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from the jolt of being seen, truly seen, after so long. "General Sterling," he managed, his voice hoarse. The general nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. Then, to the astonishment of everyone in the room, he brought his hand up and executed a crisp, formal salute. It was a gesture rarely seen outside of formal ceremonies, especially from a retired four-star to a civilian in a faded shirt. Eli, his body moving on instinct honed by years, carefully transferred his messenger bag to his left hand, and returned the salute with the practiced precision of a Marine. For a brief moment, the sterile waiting room dissolved, replaced by the dust and chaos of a forgotten battlefield. Two soldiers acknowledging a shared, secret past. "At ease, Gunny," General Sterling said, lowering his hand. "I've often wondered what became of your team." The official report stated mission success, asset extracted, team sustained minimal casualties. We all knew it was a lie. Eli lowered his hand. "Minimal casualties, sir? We lost Ramirez, Way, and Decker." I'm the last one standing from Ghost Bat 6. The words came out with a raw edge, a lifetime of suppressed grief finally finding an outlet. General Sterling's eyes darkened. I know, Gunny. I was the operations director for Chimera. I watched the live feed until it went dark. Your team, you bought them time. You bought me time. Without you, that asset would have been compromised, and the entire region would have gone up in flames. It was the tightest, cleanest exfil I've ever seen, against impossible odds. He turned to Ms. Albright, his voice now carrying the weight of command. Ms. Albright, this man is Gunny Elias Thorne. He served in one of the most critical, deniable operations in modern military history. His records are classified, not non-existent. I want his medical claims expedited, and I want them approved, effective immediately. Consider this a direct order from the Department of Defense via my office. If there's any issue, you call me directly. He handed her a business card. Ms. Albright, pale and flustered, stammered, "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." The general then turned back to Eli, his expression softening. "Let's get you some coffee, Gunny. My treat. We have a lot to talk about." He gestured toward the small, usually ignored coffee station in the corner. As they moved, the other veterans in the waiting room, many of whom had seen General Sterling before, looked on with a mixture of awe and dawning understanding. The younger man who had mocked Eli earlier now looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. They settled at a small, wobbly table. The coffee was weak, but Eli held the warm cup in his scarred hand, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the liquid. They buried the operation so deep, even I couldn't access the files after it was over, General Sterling explained. Plausible deniability was the order of the day. But I never forgot that Zippo. Ramirez showed it to me once, proud of his handiwork. He was a good man. The best, sir, Eli murmured, the memory of Ramirez sharp and painful. He gave me this. His last words, he told me to tell his wife Maria he loved her, that it was for something. I never could. Official story was a training accident. Couldn't break classified orders. He looked at the Zippo, then at the general. She lives in San Diego now. Maria Ramirez. General Sterling's eyes met his. Then we'll tell her, Gunny. Together. He pulled out his phone. I'll have my office arrange a discreet visit. A long overdue delivery of a message from a hero. Over the next few weeks, Eli's life began to change. His VA claims, once mired in bureaucratic quicksand, were fast-tracked. He received a formal apology from the VA director's office. The best burn specialists and physical therapists on base were assigned to him. The chronic pain in his hand and shoulder, while not gone, began to recede under expert care. He started walking straighter, the phantom limp less pronounced. 3 months later, Eli stood on a sun-drenched pier in San Diego, the salty air whipping around him. Beside him, General Sterling, no longer in uniform, looked out at the Pacific. A woman, her face etched with the quiet dignity of age, approached them. Maria Ramirez. Her hair was streaked with silver, but Eli saw the ghost of the young woman Ramirez had shown him in a faded photograph. Mrs. Ramirez, General Sterling began, his voice gentle. I'm General William Sterling, and this is Elias Thorne. We served with your husband, Captain Alejandro Ramirez. Maria's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and a flicker of something long buried. Alejandro, he died in a training accident, they said. Eli stepped forward, holding out the Zippo. He was a hero, ma'am. He died saving lives. He died so others could live. His last words, he wanted me to tell you he loved you, and that it was for something. He pressed the Zippo into her hand. He wanted you to have this. Maria's fingers traced the faint bat symbol, then the date. Tears welled in her eyes, silent and profound. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for telling me. Later that day, back at Fort Sterling, General Sterling sat with Eli in his office. The Secretary of Defense has approved a limited declassification of Project Chimera for historical and training purposes, the general announced. Not all details, of course, but enough to acknowledge the sacrifices. And, Gunny, we're establishing a new special operations training program. Adaptive extraction under deniable conditions. Your insights, your experience, they're invaluable. We want you to be a senior consultant. Eli looked at his scarred hand, then at the Zippo now safely back in his pocket. For years, he'd lived in the shadows, his service a ghost, his pain a secret. Now a path was opening, a chance to ensure that the lessons learned in blood and fire wouldn't be forgotten, a chance to honor his fallen comrades not just in his memory, but in the training of the next generation. I'd be honored, sir, Eli said, a genuine smile, one he hadn't felt in decades, slowly spreading across his face. He walked out of the general's office and into the Fort Sterling sunshine, the Zippo's familiar weight a comforting presence in his pocket. He wasn't just Eli Thorne, the old man with the bad hand. He was Gunny Thorne, Ghost Bat 6. And for the first time in a long time he felt truly, completely at ease. The scars remained, a part of his story, but no longer a burden. They were a testament. And now they could finally speak.